This is Jay Martin.
Welcome to the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference 2023. My name is Jay Martin, and I'm going to be your host on this stage for the next 2 days. And I have to say, the content that we put together this year is without question, this is the best we've ever done. And some of you have heard me say that before. So keep in mind, that's the one job I have. Every time we leave, I got to make sure we're better when we come back. And we nailed it this year. So I'm very excited to share this with you. We have a jam-packed 2 days right here and our stages around the hall. Now, when we're curating the content for a show like this, we sit down and we talk about what major topics and themes are most relevant to investors like you and I. And there was a lot of options this year. No matter which direction you look, chaos abounds. But this is our decade as commodities investors. I firmly believe that. There's going to be ups and downs, but we're positioned very, very well. And this conference is all about positioning. So as we curate the agenda, inevitably we land on a theme. One central theme that kind of works as a North Star and guides the conversations, the debates, the fireside chats, and all of this. And the theme we landed on this year was build a moat before you build a castle. So what does that mean? This is what we are seeing occur right now within the smartest pockets of money that we have access to, the smartest retail investors that we know, the institutions, all the way up to the biggest money in the world being the central banks. Central banks are stockpiling gold right now. That's what building a moat looks like. Retail investors are stockpiling gold right now. I increased my personal physical gold holdings last year by 50%. I'm no trendsetter. I'm no novel thinker. When I'm doing something, typically it's because I'm part of a wave of other people doing that too. Institutions are increasing their allocations. Mercer, who advises $15 trillion in assets under management, is recommending a 5% weighting in gold. Now, why is everybody building a moat right now? Now, when I say central banks are stockpiling gold, you guys know the numbers. A faster rate than we've seen in over 55 years. So why are they doing that? Is it because they expect the decade to be smooth sailing? Highly unlikely. I think they're seeing what I'm seeing, that the first 3 years of this decade, every single one of them has thrown a haymaker punch, right? 2020, we had a global pandemic and a global economic shutdown. 2021, civil unrest on a scale I've never seen in my lifetime that began in the US and spread around the globe, and millions of people organizing in protests and riots. It got extreme, government buildings breached, police stations burned to the ground. 2022, a hot war breaks out in Europe. That's tanks, that's shells, that's bullets, that's knives. It's horrific, horrific. They're seeing what I'm seeing, that we don't know what's around door number 4. Now, I am not a doom and gloom pundit. I want to make that real clear right now. I am a perpetual optimist to a fault, and I am long human ingenuity and progress. And I am very bullish on the future of my children, who are super, super young. But there's bumps along the road, and there's going to be some bumps this decade. So build a moat before you build a castle. That's what that means to us. Now look, the 3 crises I described, we're not done with those yet, right? We haven't realized the full ripple effects of a global economic shutdown. We haven't addressed the cultural tension that manifested in protests and riots, so that's coming back for us. Absolutely it is, and for sure we don't understand the consequences yet of this hot war in Europe, the subsequent sanctions, and the new world order that's forming as a result. And that's why central banks are building a moat. They're building a moat to protect their castle, and they're doing it by buying gold. Now, I'm in my 30s, so my whole life has been the era of globalized economies, right? A greater access to a wider variety of cheaper goods. Whatever you wanted to manufacture, you can take it to the global market. You can buy that iPhone in New York City. It was manufactured with labor in the US or Mexico or China. It consists of components purchased from Peru or the Yukon or West Africa. And then it was shipped back to New York City on a tanker fueled by energy purchased from Saudi Arabia or Russia. The whole world was your marketplace. We know that era is over now. We're in some new version of a Cold War. And what does that mean? It just means that the supply of everything is suddenly compromised. And the significance of that for commodity investors like you and I means that every single commodity that the world needs has suddenly become a matter of national security and strategic interest. I want to say that again. Every single commodity that the world needs is now a matter of national security and strategic interest. And that is very bullish news for commodity investors. Because as countries and companies fight to secure their supply, tsunamis of capital are going to rush into this marketplace. And it doesn't matter which direction you look. If you're looking at copper or nickel or gold or silver or uranium or oil or gas, you name it, everything has been underfunded for a decade, starved of capital, and stocks are depleting. Those tsunamis of capital, that's what you and I want to find. We want to look for those tsunamis of money and put ourselves in front of them, right? That's how retail investors make money. So how do we play this market? Because it sure looks like the metals are taking off right now. And just to give you some indication, last year at this show, we had 2,000 people attend. Today, we have 6,000 people registered. Why are 3 times as many people interested in a commodities investment conference than they were 12 months ago? You're seeing what I'm seeing. But if that makes you feel like we're getting close to some kind of a top, let me just put that in perspective. There's 500 seats in this hall right now. It's full, right? In 2012, we had 2 speaker halls with 800 seats each, and those were full too. Right now, we have 4 workshops with 50 chairs in each. In 2012, we had 6 workshops with 150 chairs in each, and you couldn't get one. They were all full. So what inning are we in? An early one. We are in the early stages of the early rounds of this game. But look, nothing goes up in a straight line, and even though this is the commodity investor's decade, there's bumps along the way. And I've seen way too many investors make piles of money and then give it all back to the market. I personally know investors who added a 0 to their net worth in the gold market of 2020 and gave it all back in 2022. And you and I are not going to do that because we're going to build a moat before we build a castle. Gold is your moat. Equities are your castle. You need both. And I'm taking this on as a personal mission this year because I feel like the gold story hasn't been told very well, especially in the West. And it's an important story because gold is your option on liquidity. That's what it does for you. Call it boring, call it a pet rock. It's like, yeah, definitely. It's supposed to be boring. What do you expect a safe haven asset to do, right? That's its job. It's your option on liquidity through the rise and fall of markets over generations, the rise and fall of empires. One asset has retained its purchasing power. 0 counterparty risk. There's no central banker that can print more and devalue the purchasing power. There's no CEO that can get caught up in a PR scandal and crash the share price. It's very, very important. It's a very important part of the portfolio. Look, we're going to be talking about that a lot in the next 2 days. Surprise, surprise. Okay, one other theme that we're going to cover at this show and I'm very excited about. I have 2 politicians joining me on stage today and people always ask, why do you want to interview politicians? What do you gain from that? And I think it's important to understand the psychology of our elected leaders, but here's how I see Canada right now. I'm Canadian. Probably most of you are too. And I would tell you that right now, we are at the most pivotal point in Canadian politics that we've seen in the last 30 years. Now, what am I talking about? I'm talking about growing dissent between the provinces and the federal government. So forgive me, I'm going to get a little bit political right now. But 2 pieces of legislation were passed this year. One being the Alberta Sovereignty Act and the other being the Saskatchewan First Act. Both of these pieces of legislation were built to give the provinces the power to emancipate themselves from the decision-making of the federal government. Now, why would they want to do that? They feel like the federal creep and jurisdictional overreach has gone too far, and now they're doing something about it. Now, I can tell you that this is the most consequential event in Canadian politics in the last 30 years, but don't take it from me. I sat down with both former Premier of British Columbia, Christy Clark, and former Premier of Saskatchewan, Brad Wall, intentionally picking politicians on either side of the political spectrum and asked them, how significant is this? Is this the most pivotal moment in Canadian political history for the last 30 years? And both of them stopped, looked me dead in the eye, did not hesitate, and said, absolutely, and nobody is paying attention. So we're going to dive into the nuances of this today with Premier Clark and Premier Brad Wall. and I'm very excited about that. All right, I want to thank you all for coming. We're going to get this show started. Are you guys excited?
This is Jay Martin.